recognize as real. By insisting he was never to his people tied. By dictating exactly what he might feel. By permitting bawdy joy, but never pride. They believed a lion could be brought to heel. That a lion could from his courage be pried. That the lion himself would learn to kneel. That a lion would not care, even if his line died. That the lion himself would accept such a deal. In the end, it was only to themselves they had lied.
Looking for a fast way to track what's moving online right now? Head over to Qnotables.com. It's a centralized index of notable clips, headlines, and references being shared across the community, organized for quick browsing. Use it to spot patterns, pull links, and build your own research list. Qnotables.com. Browse the notables, verify the facts, stay informed. All reports can be found on Q Research or Qnotables.com. Notables do not equal endorsements. We are researchers who deal in open source information, reasoned argument, and dank memes. We do battle in the sphere of ideas, and ideas only. We neither need nor condone the use of force in our work here.
From the Q Research Boards, January 10th, 2025. Opposition sources in Iran say hundreds of protesters killed in last 48 hours. Iran's nationwide uprising is turning deadlier by the day. Opposition groups and human rights monitors say dozens of protesters have already been killed, and some claim the true toll may now be in the hundreds as security forces fire live rounds into crowds across multiple cities. The regime calls demonstrators rioters and blames foreign meddling, but videos online show unarmed Iranians demanding an end to clerical rule and paying for it with their lives. Reports claim 3 cities have effectively fallen to anti-regime protesters. As protests spread, there are growing reports that anti-regime demonstrators have taken de facto control of parts of several cities. In places like Kazarun and other provincial centers, crowds have overrun streets, torched regime symbols, and forced security forces into brief retreats. State media denies losing control, but footage of burning government buildings and checkpoints suggests the uprising is no longer confined to a few neighborhoods and is now a serious challenge to the regime's grip on power. Starlink in Iran, free lifeline or limited workaround. With Iran under an intentional internet blackout, some Iranians are staying online through smuggled Starlink terminals. Reports say these units are providing uncensored access without direct charges to users, with costs often covered by donors abroad. But only a small fraction of the population can reach them, and the regime is trying to hunt down terminals and even spoof Starlink apps to spy on citizens, turning this digital lifeline into a high-risk tool of resistance. Regime cuts internet while its propaganda site stays online on foreign servers. As the regime shuts down nearly all internet and phone service inside Iran, one kind of traffic still flows: state propaganda. While ordinary Iranians are almost completely cut off from the outside world, the IRGC-linked Tasnim news agency remains accessible thanks to hosting on foreign infrastructure, including servers in the United Kingdom. That sharp contrast underscores a double standard. The regime silences its own people while keeping its narrative blasting out to global audiences. New nighttime footage shows running street battles in Tehran. Fresh video from Tehran shows intense clashes after dark. Security forces in riot gear fire tear gas and live ammunition as protesters hurl stones, set barricades on fire, and chant against Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. The capital has seen some of the largest marches yet, with demonstrators defying curfews and gunfire. Analysts say the scale of open dissent in Tehran marks one of the most serious legitimacy crises for the Islamic Republic in decades. Protesters torch banks and mosques in anger at Iran's clerical rulers. The protests are no longer just marches. They are targeting the regime's physical power centers. Videos and reports show banks, government buildings, and even mosques linked to the ruling establishment set ablaze in multiple neighborhoods. Iran's top judge is threatening harsh punishment with no leniency, while state media brands protesters as terrorists. Demonstrators say they are striking at institutions they see as tools of corruption and repression, not houses of genuine faith. Minneapolis police pull back as anti-ICE protests turn violent. In Minneapolis, protests over the fatal ICE shooting of Renee Nicole Good have escalated into street confrontations with federal agents and local police. Live footage and local reports show officers, including senior leadership, retreating from some intersections as crowds throw objects, set fires, and push through barricades. State authorities have activated emergency operations and declared unlawful assemblies in parts of the city as they struggle to restore order without further inflaming tensions. Conservative critics say anti-ICE rhetoric on the left is fueling calls for violence. As emotions run hot after the Minneapolis ICE shooting, conservatives are pointing to years of harsh anti-ICE rhetoric from prominent Democrats and activists. Homeland Security officials say threats and attacks against agents have spiked dramatically, and conservative commentators argue that extreme language has normalized talk of taking out ICE officers. YouTuber Nick Shirley says his ex-profile vanished from Google search. Conservative influencer Nick Shirley, known for his viral expose on alleged daycare fraud in Minnesota, now says big tech is coming after him. He claims his verified ex-profile no longer appears in Google results, even when users type his name directly. Supporters see this as more evidence of political censorship against right-leaning voices, while critics argue search rankings can fluctuate and note that some of his fraud claims remain under investigation. GoFundMe donations make Renee Good's family millionaires after fatal ICE shooting. In the wake of Renee Nicole Good's death at the hands of an ICE agent in Minneapolis, Americans have poured more than $1.5 million into online fundraisers for her widow and children. What began as a modest goal to cover funeral costs exploded into a seven-figure show of support in under 48 hours. Venezuelan security guard's chilling account details Maduro regime repression. A Venezuelan security guard who once served Nicolas Maduro's inner circle has given a chilling account of how protests were crushed and dissenters disappeared. In interviews shared with Latin American outlets, he describes orders to intimidate neighborhoods, infiltrate opposition groups, and make examples of anyone challenging the regime. His story tracks with years of reports about torture, extrajudicial killings, and the weaponization of poverty to keep the population in line. Judge rules, fifth federal prosecutor in high-profile case was serving illegally. A federal judge has ruled that a fifth prosecutor brought into a high-profile corruption case was serving unlawfully because of how they were appointed. The ruling, handed down by Judge Lorna Schofield, found that the appointment violated separation of powers rules and the appointments clause. The decision throws parts of the case into uncertainty and fuels complaints that political figures have been willing to bend the rules to keep certain prosecutions alive. Doomsday plane Titan 29 spotted heading toward Washington, D.C. Flight tracking enthusiasts lit up social media after an E-4B Doomsday plane using the call sign Titan 29 was spotted flying toward the D.C. area. The E-4B Night Watch is a hardened airborne command center designed to keep America's leadership connected during nuclear war or major crises. While the Air Force routinely flies these jets for training and positioning, the timing and route always raise questions about what's happening behind the scenes. Suspected Trendy Aragua operative tied to Portland truck attack on federal agents. New details are emerging about the Portland truck attack on federal agents, with authorities linking a Venezuelan suspect to the violent Trendy Aragua gang. Homeland Security says the driver and his partner entered the U.S. illegally and were already on law enforcement radar when they allegedly tried to run down Border Patrol officers with a vehicle, prompting agents to open fire. The case highlights how transnational gangs are exploiting the border crisis and then spilling violence into American cities. Iran protests push on. despite blackouts and brutal crackdowns. In Iran, opposition sources say protests continue in multiple cities despite a near-total internet blackout and reports of mass arrests and killings. Activists accuse the regime of using the shutdown to hide a bloody crackdown, while satellite internet and outside media are being used to smuggle images and testimony to the world. Ilhan Omar's $1 million addiction center earmark yanked from federal bill Senator Joni Ernst and other Republicans have successfully stripped a $1 million earmark backed by Reppers Ilhan Omar for an East African addiction center from a federal funding bill. Critics said the project lacked basic transparency and raised red flags over how tax dollars would be used, especially given prior fraud scandals tied to social service nonprofits in Minnesota. Federal judge presses Connecticut over alleged election law violations. A federal judge has ordered Connecticut officials to explain whether they have been violating federal election law by hiding key information from voters and watchdogs. Commentators are calling it a big win for election integrity, arguing that states need to follow clear rules on transparency, ballot handling, and data access. The ruling adds to a growing list of court battles where citizens and advocacy groups are forcing states to clean up sloppy or politicized election practices. BMW recalls 36,922 X3 SUVs over steering software. Glitch BMW is recalling nearly 37,000 X3 SUVs from the 2025 and 2026 model years after discovering a steering software defect that could cause unintended steering wheel movement while the vehicle is stationary. The company says the issue hasn't led to widespread crashes but wants owners to bring their vehicles in for a free software update. Safety advocates point out this is another example of how modern cars are only as safe as the code running them. Lewiston City Councilor Iman Osman resigns days after being sworn in. In Lewiston, Maine, City Councilor Iman Osman has resigned less than 72 hours after taking office, following an indictment on gun theft charges and questions about whether he actually lived in the district he claimed to represent. Osman's resignation letter blames vicious personal attacks and racism, but local critics say the real issue is honesty and basic vetting. The seat will now be filled by appointment, and residents are demanding higher standards for future candidates. Doge for Illinois. GOP challengers slam Pritzker and demand forensic audit. Two Republican contenders for Illinois governor are pushing a plan they call Doge for Illinois, combining a full forensic audit of state social service spending with a promise not to cut core services. Darren Bailey and Ted Dabrowski say Democrat Governor J.B. Pritzker has overseen ballooning costs, fraud, and crushing tax hikes while defending Minnesota's scandal-plagued leadership. Their message is simple: stop treating taxpayers like a bottomless ATM and show where every dollar goes.
At shop.isitwaya.com, everything you buy supports Acun.top, the place where people talk freely no matter what. Check out our Acun Honey Pot, a jar of yummy honey that's as strong as your voice. Put it on toaster and tea. It's not just honey, it's freedom in every bite. Then there's Acun Butter, a smooth handmade skin cream that makes you feel good while you fight for what's right. Awesome wood and pieces for display only. Hang them up or set them out. They're for showing off Acun's tough spirit. Want to help even more? Get a proto membership. So go to shop.isitwaya.com now and grab some goodies. Help Acun.top keep free speech alive, and let's keep the ideas flowing loud and free.
All reports can be found on Q Research or Qnotables.com. Notables do not equal endorsements. We are researchers who deal in open source information, reasoned argument, and dank memes. We do battle in the sphere of ideas, and ideas only. We neither need nor condone the use of force in our work here. From the Q Research Boards, January 10th, 2025. Besant offers cash rewards to Minnesota. Fraud whistleblowers. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says Minnesotans who help expose welfare fraud will be eligible for cash rewards as Washington cracks down on billions in stolen benefits. New rules force banks and money transfer shops in key counties to report overseas transfers above $3,000, aimed squarely at schemes that funneled taxpayer money to shell nonprofits and even overseas terror groups. The message from Treasury is blunt: follow the money, and those who help will get paid. Trump pushes 10% cap on credit card interest to stop ripping off Americans. President Trump is taking direct aim at the credit card giants, calling for a one-year cap of 10% on interest rates. In a Truth Social post, he blasted banks for charging working families 20 to 30%, saying he will no longer allow the American people to be ripped off. The move puts intense pressure on Congress and the industry, and it squarely frames Trump as the one fighting high-interest debt in an inflation-weary economy. Trump touts drop in mortgage rates after 200B GSE bond buying push. President Trump says his housing agenda is already delivering results. In a new statement, he notes that mortgage rates have fallen to about 5.7%, down from roughly 8% under Joe Biden. Trump credits his directive ordering Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to buy $200 billion in mortgage bonds, arguing the move narrowed spreads and forced lenders to bring rates down. He calls it great news for young families who were priced out of homeownership just a year ago. Trump portrait goes up at the National Portrait Gallery. The Trump era is now literally on the walls of the National Portrait Gallery. The museum has unveiled its official portrait of President Donald J. Trump at its home in Washington, D.C., recognizing his place in American history alongside past presidents. The painting's debut comes as Trump is driving an aggressive second-term agenda on the economy, borders, and foreign policy. And it's already become a must-see stop for supporters visiting the nation's capital. Trump moves to ban big Wall Street firms from buying up homes. President Trump is targeting one of the most hated trends in the housing market: Wall Street firms buying entire neighborhoods. He's announced plans to ban large institutional investors from purchasing additional single-family homes, arguing that people live in homes, not corporations. The proposal comes after years of hedge funds and private equity driving up prices and outbidding families. If enacted, it would mark one of the toughest crackdowns on corporate landlords in modern history. Trump orders Fannie and Freddie to buy $200 billion in mortgage bonds. In a bold intervention in the housing market, President Trump has ordered Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to purchase $200 billion in mortgage-backed securities. His goal is clear: drive borrowing costs down and jumpstart affordability. Analysts say the move has already narrowed mortgage spreads and contributed to the recent drop in rates, though they debate how long the effect will last. Trump, for his part, is framing it as proof that he's using Washington's levers for Main Street, not Wall Street. Trump leaves White House for weekend after Venezuela oil talks. President Trump has departed the White House for the weekend after an hours-long strategy session with top oil executives on rebuilding Venezuela's shattered energy sector. The meeting focused on securing private investment while keeping American control over security and contracts. As Trump heads out of town, both allies and critics are watching to see if big oil buys into his vision of turning post-Maduro Venezuela into a major pro-America energy partner. Trump backs Iranian protesters, warns regime against a massacre. President Trump is speaking out again on Iran, praising demonstrators as brave people, and warning the regime not to start shooting or face severe consequences. As mosques burn, banks are torched, and the internet remains cut off, Trump says the U.S. stands with protesters demanding freedom and an end to corruption. The White House is signaling that Tehran will be held directly responsible for any bloodbath in the streets. Poilievre says Canada faces a liberal extortion crisis. In Canada, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is blasting Justin Trudeau's Liberals for what he calls an extortion crisis. He points to statistics showing extortion crimes up sharply in recent years, with gangs and organized crime preying on ordinary Canadians, while Ottawa obsesses over political games. Poilievre is promising tougher sentences, bail reform, and more power for police to crack down on the criminals he says the Liberals have allowed to run wild. The case shows limits of Trump's pardon power over state convictions. A high-profile Colorado case involving Tina Peters is reminding Americans that the president's pardon power only goes so far. Trump issued a federal pardon for a controversial election official, but because she was convicted under state law, Colorado courts still hold her behind bars. Legal experts note this is settled constitutional doctrine. Presidents can wipe away federal charges, but they cannot overrule state juries or governors. Trump tears into crooked Minnesota officials over fraud and ICE backlash. President Trump is turning up the heat on Minnesota leaders, accusing crooked officials of presiding over massive welfare fraud and then attacking ICE when federal agents step in. He points to the $250 million Feeding Our Future scandal and new freezes on federal funds as proof that the state's political class failed taxpayers. Happy Trump moment contrasts with deep global turmoil. In a lighter moment at the White House, President Trump told reporters he was happy with progress on the economy, border security, and foreign policy, even as crises rage abroad. Supporters see the upbeat tone as confidence from a president who believes his America First agenda is finally taking hold. Critics argue it's out of step with the gravity of events in places like Iran and Venezuela. But for Trump's base, a confident commander-in-chief is exactly what they voted for. Trump jokes again about buying Greenland, calls it great real estate. Asked about his years-old idea of buying Greenland, President Trump once again leaned in, calling the island incredible real estate with enormous strategic value. He reminded reporters that the U.S. already maintains a major base there and said Washington should never rule anything out when it comes to securing its Arctic interests. Denmark still isn't selling, but the exchange shows Trump hasn't lost his taste for big, unconventional deals. Iran on the clock becomes rallying cry in pro-Trump online circles. On the Q research boards, Anons say Iran is on the clock, pointing to symbolic timestamps and news cycles they see as lining up with regime missteps. They argue the combination of mass protests, burned mosques, and economic collapse means the clerics are running out of time. Whatever one thinks of the numerology, the reality on the ground is undeniable. The regime has never looked weaker, and the world is watching to see if this moment becomes a true turning point. New Trump national security strategy lays out America First blueprint. The national security strategy released in November 2025 cements Trump's America First doctrine in a 30-plus page blueprint. It calls for secure borders, military dominance, economic nationalism, and peace through strength, not endless wars. Supporters say it finally aligns U.S. foreign policy with what voters actually want. Critics warn it's too transactional and risks alienating allies. Either way, it's now the formal playbook for how this White House views the world. Heads on a swivel as grassroots ask what's coming next. In conservative grassroots chats, one common theme keeps popping up: heads on a swivel. With multiple crises breaking at once, border chaos, street violence, and foreign unrest, activists say Americans need to stay alert, question official narratives, and prepare for rapid shifts. It's less a specific prediction than a mindset. Assume the political class won't tell you the full story and do your own homework. New book argues today's crises are designed, not random. A growing cottage industry of writers and pundits on the right argue that many of today's random crises are actually the product of deliberate strategies, psyops designed to keep citizens confused and compliant. One viral essay, "Someone Designed This Experience," urges readers to map out how media, big tech, and bureaucracy steer public emotion. Whether you buy all of it or not, the core message resonates. Don't just react emotionally to events. Ask who benefits from the chaos. Trump hints at deal with oil giants after Venezuela meeting. President Trump says he sort of formed a deal with big oil executives after their White House meeting on Venezuela, though details remain vague. He's promising them security and access to huge untapped fields if they help rebuild the country's energy sector under a pro-U.S. government. Critics worry about corporate carve-outs. Supporters say if American companies don't step in, China and Russia will. Online patriots urge, archive that shizzle before censors move in. Among online researchers and meme makers, a simple rule has become gospel: archive before you share. With posts disappearing, edits being made on the fly, and platforms throttling reach, conservative users are saving screenshots and grabbing web archives of key documents before they vanish. The mindset reflects a deep mistrust of big tech and a determination to build their own parallel record of what actually happened. Debate over BLM's label shows gap between law and public anger. On the right, many Americans say Black Lives Matter acts like a political street movement flirting with terror tactics. But under U.S. law, there is no formal list of domestic terror organizations, and prior attempts to have BLM labeled as such have been rejected by the federal government. That gap between how angry citizens feel and what the law currently recognizes continues to fuel demands for tougher domestic terror statutes that don't only target the right. Q-linked chatter again predicts decline in Bill and Hillary Clinton's health. In Q-aligned corners of the internet, an old drop is circulating again, claiming that Bill and Hillary Clinton's public health will begin to rapidly deteriorate. There is no hard evidence behind the prophecy, but believers say recent reports of medical issues are proof the prediction is coming true. For most viewers, this is less news than a window into the subculture that sees nearly every headline as part of a long-running script. Family details paint more complex picture of Renee Good's life. New reporting on the late Renee Good reveals a complicated personal story. Court documents and financial records indicate her mother was still paying many of her bills, and photos show Good embracing Black Lives Matter imagery during the 2020 protests. Investigators also say she once sent money to a contact flagged by Treasury for possible terror ties, though no formal terror charges were filed. For supporters, she remains a martyr. For critics, these details complicate efforts to turn her into a simple hero narrative. Real America's Voice brands itself home of real news and honest views, conservative network. Real America's Voice continues to lean into its branding as the home of real news and honest views. The channel, which carries programs from MAGA-aligned hosts and live coverage of protests and Trump events, pitches itself as the antidote to legacy media spin. With cord-cutting on the rise and trust in traditional outlets at historic lows, Rev is betting that an unapologetically pro-America stance is exactly what its audience wants.
Every voice matters. The power of free speech is more important than ever. Imagine a place where you can share your thoughts freely, explore new ideas, and engage in meaningful conversations anonymously. With online anonymity, you can express yourself without fear of judgment. It's about freedom, creativity, and connection. Join the conversation that matters. Embrace your voice. Celebrate your freedom. Visit 8kun.top today. That's 8kun.top.
That's all for now. Stay alert, stay informed, and never hand your thinking over to anyone on a screen, including me. God bless you, God bless our troops, and God bless the United States of America.